Welcome to Agile to Agility podcast with Miljan, Bajic.
Major show alert!
The very first value we wrote is individuals and interactions.
Let's take this another level.
You and I know a lot of Scrum trainers out there, in both certified and professional Scrum trainers, are very I will teach you the guide. Like, I will teach you this document, and it's getting almost like faux religious, almost, or almost like not cult's too strong, but a little bit like you must have this because the guide says so.
Who is Nigel Baker?
Who is Nigel Baker? This is interesting, actually, because just this morning I had to fill in a bio for a conference I'm presenting at online. Adam Weisbart's doing his online Agile Summit thing, so I'm presenting a session there. So I had to write my own bio, and I found it surprisingly difficult because who the hell am I? Like, what do I found it interesting. It summoned so many thoughts. It's like, because I have my own image of myself. I have an image I think other people have of myself. I have like what I feel is a true image, and but they're all, how do you capture it? So I think I thought, well, because I used to boast. So when I first, when you feel like you don't fully got to make your name in the world, like 20 years ago, whatever, I'll be like, oh, I'm one of the first Scrum trainers on earth. I'm one of this. I've done this. I've done that. And doing it so long now, so I talk about that stuff less and less, about like bragging or self-aggrandizing myself. So it's like, oh yeah, I train Scrum. I coach Agile. Well, that's like, well, I guess we all do, really. So I said, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I said basically what I try to do in life is I try to have 2 quarts of deep overthinking. So really think about a subject, really think about it, right? Adding a big slice of cynicism. Because I'm quite, Agile's about optimism and open-mindedness and yes and, but actually in my heart, I'm quite a cynical individual as well. And that sort of gives me sharpness, I feel, in terms of like simple. Like people write things online, these very florid ideas. And I'm always thinking, that's a great LinkedIn article, but you wouldn't do it in real life. Real life's a lot sharper, it needs to be simpler. What's the simplest thing that could possibly work? That's the ultimate cynical attitude, which I think I've got a little bit of. And the other dash is humor. Like a double, a shot double, 2 shots of humor in there as well. I thought that's what I realized the other day, that sort of colors everything I do. So everything I do kind of is a joke in my mind, and that's very powerful. As a coach, as a trainer, humor can be what was it Shakespeare said? Many a true word is spoken in jest. So you can, with a joke, you can get away with pointing out some harsh truths. But also there's a dark side to humor, which is it can be what they call punching down. So if you'll be careful with humor, you use humor too much, you could be too withering, you could be too cynical, and you're like the nihilistic comic, referencing the decline of the universe, rather than what we're trying to be, which is change agents helping transform the world of work. So yeah, I think that's basically it. Deep amount of overthinking, a slice of cynicism, two shots of humor, all wrapped into an agile coaching, training, and consulting package. I guess that's me. That's what I am.
That's awesome, and that's why I started asking this question. I almost ask it at the beginning of every interview, because rather than just doing the typical intro. So based on what you just said, that made me think and jump maybe immediately into the Nigel scale, because I think Nigel scale is that
my crowning glory.
So tell us about it, because I think in our circles people are familiar with it, but I don't know. I mean, I think people are outside, maybe let's start with the Nigel scale. How did you come up with it, and what is Nigel scale?
So it's interesting, actually. So I did a presentation a few months ago in lockdown about it, and I actually went back and read the original posts where the conversation was happening, because I've got into this huge philosophy of like context is king. right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is like, if you understand where something comes from, you understand the environment that created something, it gives you a far better understanding of how to use it and not to use it, right? And so a lot of people don't take context into account when they're talking about something, or worse, take it too much into account. Oh, we can't do that here because we're very special. No, you're not. You're not. You're like everyone else, actually, right? So what happened was this. Basically, around 2008, there was a huge car crash of a few different ideas. So around then, we were talking. They were trying to come up with some sort of exam for the Certified Scrum Master course. So at this point, up to about 2007, 2008, Scrum was still quite malleable. Scrum was still quite flexible. There's lots of books written on it, but each book says something different. So it's even the people who've created it haven't curated it. So there's lots of different writing about it. So lots of people have a differing idea of what it is and what it isn't. And we're trying to come up with an exam where we examine it. Well, if you don't know what it is, how can you examine it? And so famously, Ken Schwaber was paid what I believe is a large sum of money to produce something called the Scrum Hub, which was like a collection of Scrum writings and ideas. And what actually came out was like a 10-page document called the Scrum Guide, which is kind of the simplest thing that could possibly work, I guess, but not quite. Anyway, but that didn't quite line up with what people thought Scrum was, which didn't line up with the test, which didn't line up with what was on Scrum Master training, on people's certified Scrum Master courses. So it's 4 different, like a Venn diagram from hell, these 4 different crossover worlds. And in the Scrum community, in the Scrum trainer forum, we're discussing this stuff at quite a level of detail that most civilians don't discuss. So it really was a case, you read the post, it really is a huge case of, well, I think you'll find, well, I think you'll find, well, very nerdy, right? Very nerdy. So anyway, having this discussion, I believe it was actually on the concept of agile project managers, right?
Yeah.
An oxymoron like military intelligence. Anyway, but they were clashing. So I came up with this Nigel scale idea. Now it turns out, I named it after myself. And for years, I've jokingly said I did that as a self-aggrandizing thing, like the Nigel scale. But actually, what I was doing, and I've discovered this recently, I was actually mocking something called the Nokia test, which a lot of people don't remember anymore. But if you think back 10, 15 years, it was hugely popular. I think Baz Vod and a few people in Nokia networks came up with like a way to assess your agility, right? And it was very popular. People like Jeff Sutherland leapt on it and loved it. And then people realized you probably don't want to have that type of assessment. You end up with people claiming their coffees are daily scrums. And when they were shouted at as their bosses, they're retrospective. But it was this kind of like assessment, the Nokia test. Well, that's what I got the name for. It's okay. There's the Nokia test. I've got the Nigel scale, right? So this is the context. Context is king. Now, basically, the Nigel scale is like a 3-point model. Okay, so 3 levels of categorization originally when I came up with it. Level 1 is there are things that are core. A Nigel scale 1, things that are fundamental, things that you've got to do them. Like if you bend them, everything breaks. If you don't do this, you get into trouble. So the example I use these days is surgery. You have a surgery. We're going to remove something or fix something in you. And the doctor goes, well, I'm going to perform your operation. I won't be washing my hands. I won't be disinfecting my hands because I do not believe in bacteria and viruses. Bacteria and viruses were invented by Big Pharma. They don't exist, so I don't need to wash my hands. It's like, shut up. Or they go, I'm going to dip my hands in cow manure so I get loads of good bacteria on my hands, because bacteria is good for you, helps your digestive transit. So I'll get loads of good bacteria to put on my hands, so when I introduce them to your body, when I'm removing your spleen, you get healthy bacteria. Like, shut up. You can have your
we'll even charge you for it.
Oh yeah, charge you. But there's the point. You can have your own opinions, but you can't have your own facts. Right? So there's certain fundamental things. As a surgeon, you disinfect your hands. You wash your hands. It's like a fundamental. It's one of the now, of course, if you look into, I think Liz Keogh said about, if you look into actual surgeons washing their hands, the first person who suggested it was ridiculed and driven out of the world of surgery, because surgeons didn't believe in that concept. So it goes to show you what's fundamental may not be what you believe is fundamental. But that's the idea of the core things. These are things that really, if you don't do them, you're in trouble. So in our Scrum world, we tend to talk about things in the Scrum guide, then they should really be those core fundamentals. You know, there'll be stuff that if you bend it, you're going to get into a bit of trouble. It's not going to work very well. Now, the bad news for everyone is most of what we do as coaches, trainers, agile people isn't that. It's Nigel Scale 2, which is the good stuff. I used to call it best practice, but since getting really into Cynefin and things like that, complexity thinking,
it's a good practice.
It's good practice, yeah. It's the world of good practice, the world of contextuality, the world of self-organizing, self-organizing good answers to your complex problems. You know, inspecting and adapting, experimenting, learning, contextually understanding your own space in your own way and finding your own answers. There's loads of things in that world that other people have done. You can do them as well. They may work. They probably will work. But remember, the words may and probably are carrying a lot of weight. Yeah, it's like may work, probably, careful, be very careful. And Nigel Scale 3 is bad, basically. Things that are anti-patterns, things that lots of people have tried and they don't work and you fall over. Again, never say never, because you could be the company that makes it work. But there's a big pile of bodies out back of companies who thought they could make it work. So
and you're talking in the context of complexity, right? They're anti-patterns in terms of complexity and that environment. Yeah,
in that space, definitely. In fact, you could use the Nigel Scale outside of our world. That sort of idea of fundamental good and bad has got a lot of cross applicability. But I'm really thinking about our world in the agile space, specifically the Scrum space. Actually, is what I'm thinking of. And the basic, and what I learned from introducing that idea was vast amounts of people confuse what is a fundamental thing we should do, like in Scrum, for instance, with something that is good, with something that is bad. And so I always like to joke, confusing a core practice with a good practice is a bad practice. There's the idea of like, and people do it all the time. And it's why I'm nervous. I'm talking so much these days about contextual understanding of Agile, but when I see it in real life, a lot of people bend the things they shouldn't bend and keep fixed the things they shouldn't keep fixed. So people like obsess on story points and velocity and release trains, of which are just contextual practices that don't even work in lots of settings, and yet completely flex the idea of self-organizing or empowerment or coaching or leadership and just think that's very flexible. And that's a huge concern for me. So something I'm trying to talk more about, just helping us understand where we need to be stiff and where we need to be flexible. And that Nigel Scale has been that was a revelation probably for me, but more importantly, that's been sort of a building block on which I've built a lot of ideas since then. So a lot of the work I've been doing recently has been really about investigating sort of how practices change over time, how practices change over context, how should we as coaches and trainers understand how things change? So i.e., here's a method, here's another method, great. Which one do you pick is interesting, but what's more interesting to me is how do they overlap? How do you change from one to the other? How do you like changing has become the huge interest for me. So how patterns change over time. And finally, how then we as coaches, trainers, consultants, scrum masters, whatever, how do we engage in that changing? And that's something else I've been trying to do some work on. And it's, as I tell you now, I have no answers. No answers at all, but I've got some really interesting questions on it, which I think we should be having some more conversations on in the agile space.
What are some of those questions? I mean, because I agree, like, and I've talked about it. I feel like I'm talking about it in every podcast, but the idea of cooks and chefs, like there's too many cooks out there, not enough chefs that understand, and not enough people that want to be chefs. Everybody just wants a recipe. But coming back to your question, what are the questions then that you've been asking around?
I think that cook and chef idea is a really good idea in terms of the recipes, following recipes, and when not to follow a recipe, when to invent your own. Because again, it's a big ask to expect like a normal human being to be inventing their own gourmet meals. There is a place for recipes, but it's understanding what that place is and what that place is not. So an example I use is like estimating techniques. So whether you estimate or not is up to you, but let's say you've got something like planning poker, right? A famous technique, loads of people know it. Some people love it and some people hate it, right? And they love it and hate it for similar reasons. And the important point to understand with it is, it's not that planning poker is right or wrong. It's the experience you're having and your level of ability and skill is what's driving its usefulness or its lack of usefulness.
Exactly.
So for like me, I do the Nigel scale. I like to graph it, like have a visual graph, sort of show the scale over time. And you'll see that I'll draw like planning poker. So it decays quite quickly. It's a good skill. With new teams, I really rate it as an idea. But after a while, it decays. No one wants to be playing with the cards 6 months in. It sort of like stabilizes on a bicycle, to get used to riding a bike. So then you get another technique like affinity estimation, put the cards in a straight line, move them around. Germans call it magic estimation, I think. But, the idea, keep it silent, move it around. Great technique. Again, with the new team, comes unstuck. They don't know what they don't know. So how can they ask the right questions? But in a more mature team, it's really powerful. So you've got like one method that works with newbies well and kind of doesn't offer value with experts. One technique that works better with experts doesn't offer value with newbies. So it's pretty interesting. Okay, that's great. Those are the two recipes. Which one do I do? Well, that's a hard choice to make. But the harder choice is, as I said, how do you go from one to the other? Yeah. So, and this I think a lot of us don't spend enough, not just us, but I mean the world of Agile do not spend enough time of thinking of the changing, the transitioning. Like with two techniques, you could hard swap. You could say tomorrow we are doing new technique, old technique, bad in bin. Or what a lot of people do, you'll often see them, they sort of hybridize away. So they don't mean to, but they kind of like evolve a new estimation technique. So this, we're doing planning poker. There's no cards, no one votes. And you look at it and go, well, this animal has seriously evolved since I was last here. But it's the right thing for them. And then if you ask them, oh, why did you choose to do it that way? They'll often look at you and go, oh yeah, it's changed. I never noticed. Why did we change it? Do you remember that? Should we change it back? No, it's wonderful. Or maybe they could run them in parallel, try both techniques out and see which one they like. So there's all these different like nice pathways from one technique to the other. And I think a lot of what we do in the Agile space is communicate photographs. So we like snapshots, like a picture of it. Click, here's a picture. There's a cake. Here's a muscly man. Click photo. And what we need to be teaching more or talking more about is the process of ing. Like, how do you get fit? How do you change? How do you transition? Things to be aware of. And I think because otherwise, all that's happening is in our world we have communicated one snapshot, which was the traditional waterfall, demonic, evil, like whatever nonsense. And now we're communicating a new snapshot, which is agile, wonderful. But of course, what we're trying to create in our world is a world that is agility, flexible, not agile in the big A, but actually changing the world. And you can't, that's not just one step. It's not just going, okay, old world, new world. It's going, and
it's a continuous thing. It's more like this, right?
Yeah. And to do that, we need to have the ability to be able to understand and reflect on that. Otherwise, people are just, and I feel this a lot, people are locking on to the new techniques with the same mindset of the old techniques. Recipe led, follow the process, don't think too hard, don't change it. And that's all the patterns that we've been trying to get away from with our new approach. And
just different practices, but same. I mean,
and you get the same thing comes back. And that's the problem. If you take it with the old mindset, like you see it with big scaled implementations, like I like to badmouth safe, and I shouldn't, but
everybody does.
Easy. It's so easy. It's like a comedy. But the point is not that the things they do are wrong, though some are very wrong. It's that its very nature seems to lend itself towards shifting back to the old way. So before you realize that you have multiple layers of management, senior leaders setting direction, teams being unempowered on very narrow furrows. And because the shape, though the shape has changed a bit, the principles underpinning the shape haven't. And so it just, it's like a squeezy ball. You squeeze it, you've got a new shape. You let go of the squeezing, it just pops back to its old shape. It's kind of like that. And I think what the stuff we need to think about in the Agile space is it's not transformed the world of work. is transforming the world of work, and that's a perpetual state. It's interesting. It's interesting.
It is. And I mean, like at the core of this is like, if we don't understand things like, using the cooking analogy, like, food at the chemical level and ingredients, then you're just throwing stuff in and you're just, without understanding. So, so maybe to come back to the Scrum guide, you've been pretty vocal about for years about adding some type of Agile library, Scrum appendix, and moving away, at least when it comes to Scrum Alliance, moving away from Scrum guide. Why? What are some? I mean, I know, but I think it'll be.
It's interesting. So the Scrum guide is like a map. It's like an ordnance survey map. We have them in the UK, the ordnance survey. I don't know what it's like in America and other countries, but they sort of give you these official maps of the country, right? And so the Scrum guide is a map. But it doesn't tell you anything about the territory. The famous quote, a map is not the territory. It doesn't give you nuance. It doesn't give you context. It doesn't give you interesting walks. Like you have a map to know, I want to walk over there. I want to drive over there. It's not just about what the terrain actually is, the physics of the terrain. It's about the human experience of the terrain. And I think there's not enough literature out there about supporting that. Basically, 12 nice country walks. What walks could we go on? What ways could we do this? Because there are recipes. Now, we don't like it being too algorithmic, but there are certain recipes that work nicely. Sort of like I do a Sunday roast. So every Sunday, I cook a roast for the family, right? It's quite simple, not simple. There's lots of things to do, but I'm not reinventing the wheel every time. My children don't want fancy flambe prawns. They don't want anything. They just want some nice basic food, with nice food, but food. And so I can do that, and teaching that would be useful. How to make a good sauce. There's all these other things, and I think they'll make it quite rich, the Agile space, because at the moment, a lot of it is like, here are the bare fundamentals, good luck. And that's why a lot of people fall into the grass of sort of more algorithmic, more recipe-led approaches, like the Scaled Agile framework, or even like Jira, because Jira is by far the most popular Agile scaling technique, which is a tool. It's like not even supposed to be a scaling technique, but they hold on to it because it gives them some algorithms to follow and hold on to. And I feel there's like a gap in our space. Stuff that isn't like vitally super essential, but stuff that would be good to know to add to your repertoire. So use your chef's analogy, right? A good chef has lots of good fundamentals of cooking. They know how to run up a roux, a sauce. They know how to fry. They know the fundamentals, and that gives them a repertoire of skills that allow them to create quite an advanced idea in the middle. What we need to do is add that repertoire of skills to our cooks to turn them into chefs. And at the moment, what a lot of people are doing is just doing more complex recipes rather than build that repertoire. And yes, that's why I thought something like an appendix. So I saw two.
Is that more like a set of patterns and like practices, or is it both practices and patterns?
Yeah. So for me, it's like practices and patterns. So things you could add around it, things that you can support. Here's things that are really good and viable to help you do this. And the other side of it is actually maybe annotating the guide, maybe adding some detail to the guide to help basically put some context in. So when it says something like true leader, which means nothing, it literally means nothing. It's like a platitude where you can say, some people look at that as terms of servant leadership and sort of bring richer information in, sort of use the guide rather than the answer, which a lot of people treat it as, use it as a Trojan horse to introduce loads of other ideas and create a sort of a richer, broader world from it and have it be one piece of that. Because as you and I know, a lot of Scrum trainers out there, in both certified and professional Scrum trainers, are very, I will teach you the guide. Like, I will teach you this document. And it's getting almost like faux religious almost, or almost like not cult's too strong, but a little bit like you must have this because the guide says so.
It goes back to, and that's like, I was talking to Tom Meller a couple of weeks ago, and he said like that's like Ken had that allure around him, not cult wise, but like and I think because he was involved in both Scrum Alliance and Scrum.org, there's a little bit of that where both organizations, I would say more like both Scrum Alliance and Scrum.org more than any other organization, use the Scrum guide as that baseline, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on maybe like the relationship between Scrum Alliance and Scrum Org? I know like you've been somewhat critical about Scrum Alliance and some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on
I was yeah, so
yeah.
I've got lots of friends who are Scrum.org trainers.
Mhm.
So and the quality of their work seems to be good. I'm never ever impressed by a for-profit company. You know, we're transforming the world of work. That's transforming the wallet of Ken. You know, the pocketbook of Ken. Really, it's with all the noble bells and whistles around it. It is a private company generating profit, and I just find that I'm not a socialist or communist or anything like that,
Yeah.
but I find that it's a very difficult space when you start putting money right up to next to principles. And
Yeah.
I'm a bit uncomfortable with that. I know a few people that find their exams a bit unpopular because the exams
Yeah.
feel like they're almost a till. You know, you take it, you fail, ka-ching, you take it, you fail, ka-ching, until you get there, which seems to me not really building a community, building an inclusive world. You know, I would love the two communities to be one, by the way. I would thoroughly love that. I once heard the rumor that there were some conversations about that at one point that went nowhere, but I still think that would be something pretty viable. But it would really have to be in like the auspices of a community-led organization.
Exactly.
Because that's scrum.com, really, isn't it? It's not .org, not an org, the private company, right? Scrum.com. We are genuinely pretty much the only non-profit out there that is one, non-profit, but also genuinely changing the world of work, genuinely transforming the world of work. Got tools and avenues and methods and products to genuinely help build a community and build a world around that community. And so for me, that community aspect, that alliance is the key word.
Yeah.
You know, the alliance is the key word. The Agile Alliance has been great. I've been a member for a long time, but the Agile Alliance is really a conference, really.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, it's a conference and that's it. Hasn't gone much further than that for reasons when the Scrum Alliance can. And it should. So there's some things that should be done, I think, that only the Scrum Alliance can do. Like, for instance, building up that supporting documentation, not built off individual experts like us, but built community-wide, pattern based off real research. Only the Alliance has got the community to draw that information. Only the Scrum Alliance has got the money to pay for the research. And only the Scrum Alliance has then got the collective strength to then publish that and give it some weight. So it's not just another person's opinion on LinkedIn. And so I think so taking advantage of our community, not in a commercial way, like exploiting them, but exploiting their knowledge, bringing out that information from them and sharing that across the world is a really powerful way to change things in companies. And
it is, and you've said like that. You know, maybe not to directly paraphrase, but in a sense, like Scrum Alliance needs to step up their game when it comes to PR game. And one of the things that stood out that you said is I like this one. The rumor gets around the world before the truth has its boots on.
Very much so. Yeah.
That resonated with me because I think we could be doing at least Scrum Alliance, but also Scrum.org could be doing much better. But at times it seems Scrum.org is doing better with PR than Scrum Alliance. Do you feel the same way? Or?
Maybe, but if they're kind of like playing the same game, it's really not. I think if one does good PR, the other one does. I've never been. My big fear with Scrum.org was never, someone's competing with my Scrum training. It was someone rubbish is competing with my Scrum training. That was always my concern. Because remember, they don't remember Nigel. They don't remember Agile Bear. They remember Scrum. So they have like a rubbish experience that doesn't work. Scrum's the thing that gets hit in the throat. Like a lot of people don't even know if they've been trained by Scrum Alliance or Scrum.org. They just don't know. They don't remember. They remember Scrum. They went on a course. If it's good and they learned a lot and it helped, they tell other people. If it was rubbish and didn't help, they tell a lot of people. And so that's always been my concern. It's like I've had people challenge me. Yeah, it's all about quality. And if we could get so like in terms of what we do as Scrum trainers, whatever, as certified trainers, if our work can be high quality and value add, right, then the commercials will take care of themselves. You know, the money will come in, we'll make our livings, and the world will grow, right? If we over commercialize what we do in terms of like the Agile space, it becomes exploit, not as Ken Beck would say, like explore or expand, and then you're just mining an ever dwindling group. And again, in the agile space, I have a horrible feeling that there are many, and it's not org actually, but there are many other communities out there that feel very much an exploit. Sort of like we have got a reservoir that we will eat all the fish. But at some point, there's going to be no fish left. What they need to actually understand is their job's not to exploit people for commercial purposes. Their job is to help people improve their lives in work, right? Through that help and that relationship, they will have, if they design their business well, a commercial opportunity. So the tail shouldn't wag the dog. And so
but it's so easy because like a lot of people have gotten used to the if we just look at the essentially like the way that we train, the way specifically through Scrum Alliance, because I think it's different through Scrum.org, but like there's level of expectations that CSTs have been comfortable with that a lot of times I've seen it where we put the money and financial aspects before the mission to make the and sometimes I don't know if it's the environment that creates that but
it's realism. So I don't feel bad about that, and I'll tell you why. Because I meet many agile coaches on the ground, right, who are not genuinely making change in their organizations for simple reasons. They're getting paid quite nicely, and if they make too much fuss, they get fired and released. And they've got a house with a mortgage and some kids, and they've got to pay them. I understand that. I understand. What I want to do is give them tools to allow them to make change and not get fired. So it's actually so that you can do this. You don't have to you're not a zealot. You don't have to sacrifice your career on a daily Scrum. But it's the same thing with the Scrum trainer community. I've noticed in America, it's quite interesting. It's different to Europe. So for me as a trainer, COVID's made it different. So I've done a lot less coaching in the last 18 months because of COVID, a lot less because of COVID. So it's mainly been training I've been doing. But mostly what I do is training for companies. So I go in 3 days on Zoom, chatting, talking, discussing. I do some for individuals, mostly companies. So this is your company, and go round, right? And I just discovered the other day from the Scrum Alliance that actually the majority of most people's business in America is actually public training, where they would historically set up in a hotel in, I don't know, some small town America, and they'll set up in a hotel and people would come to that course and they'll sort of go around place to place like a roaming, I don't know, like a salesman or something, going from town to town, running these courses. Now, of course, that business model has been completely smashed by COVID, completely. Everyone's online, anyone can go anywhere, no one's in the office. Like that entire idea of sort of going around as a training company, doing those individual places, that's smashed. And I don't know if that's ever going to come back as an actual viable business model. But I think the risk but for a lot of Scrum trainers, they need to understand their duty, or not duty is the wrong word, their essence as a certified Scrum trainer or professional Scrum trainer is not inexorably linked to their business model. So you can find a different business model in there and still achieve results and still do quite well. And so I think there's an element of some people are just scared. So I understand. Not everyone's going to transform the world of work. For me, in terms of our community, how many is like 400 trainers? Is there something?
Not even,
something like that. So if 200 of those just did good Scrum courses the rest of their life, they're still changing the world a bit. They're still nudging the world forward. They're still making changes, still helping people. They're still delivering value. They're still doing a good job. But some of us have to do a bit more. Right? I don't know what more is, but we got to do a bit more. We got to do a bit more than that. If all 400 of us sit there and just do Scrum courses for people, I think that's not going to be enough. And the risk is, as we're seeing, people are already stepping into the space with big voices, just not necessarily big voices, big opinions, but not necessarily the right ideas. And so we've got to be careful because it's very easy for this movement, because there's no leaders in it. There's very easy for this movement to be corrupted, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And again, I don't want to say, I said something the other day which was quite interesting to me. I said, just remember, different isn't wrong. Wrong isn't bad. Bad isn't evil. So just because someone's got a different idea to you doesn't mean they're wrong and you're right. If they are wrong, doesn't mean they're bad person or bad. And if it is bad, it doesn't make them evil. It's like good people do bad things all the time. It's got to be a bit more rounded here. And so, not to villainize people, but generally in the Agile space, there are lots of voices out there sharing ideas that you would politely say are different, you would impolitely say are wrong. And you may say they're bad. The people aren't.
But they are. We've all been there, right?
Yeah,
we've all been there where we've done the same thing.
Yeah, and it's
go back 10,
curating
15 years ago.
Yeah, well, things roll on, things improve, things change. In fact, there was right at the time, just not right now. But what the point I'm trying to make is that we need to have we need to make sure there's some strong voices from the right angles, just to make so we don't just get, because Agile very much loves the next new idea. What the famous thing in Agile is dead. Whatever it is dead. So someone say Agile is dead, Scrum is dead, story points is dead, velocity is dead. As Kanban is dead, safe is dead, less is dead, dead is dead. Like everything is dead, and here's a new idea that I'm trying to sell you. It's better, right? And it's kind of like, well, it's good that we've got no sacred cows, no sacred gods. We smash everything, but if you believe in nothing, you'll believe in everything. So the risk is there's loads of weird and wonderful ideas coming in without any quality control or fidelity on them. And the final thing on this, I think, people like us in the community have a duty of care, because we can say anything and we still get paid. As we walk away, everyone's happy. But people are running these experiments on their jobs, as there's a huge duty of care there. So let's say I came up with an idea. I said, you know what, the best way to get results in your company, punch your boss in the face. Best way, it's a great technique, worked for me. I got promoted 10 times doing it, right? So I'm just lying through my teeth, right? Lying through my teeth. But it doesn't affect me. I still get paid. But that person goes and slaps their boss, all of a sudden they're in court. And so the idea is we have a duty of care that we do no harm as people talking about this stuff. And again, I worry about the space because there's lots of hypotheses, but where's the evidence? Where's the feedback loops? Where's the Agile in it? Where's the actual Scrum of it? The feedback. So that's one of my big bugbears at the moment.
Yeah, and like the Agile is getting bigger. Like I'm getting people from industries that you typically wouldn't have seen. And you've worked with NGOs and non-IT environments. What are some of the things that you're learning and have been learning?
Well, it's interesting. So what I've learned, so outside IT is fascinating, right? What I've discovered is something that when you get into the physical world of work, where work is physical, a lot of things are a lot harder than software. So slicing up a problem, like I was doing some work with a toy company. So you can't see, on my desk here is a range of toys, right? Both new ones they've given me and old ones I've dug out of storage. So just this week, I did a product owner training course, true story, product owner training, and we discussed the product management of these. That is, ladies and gentlemen, you may not have seen one of these before. If you're an old man, you may have seen these back in the 80s. This is what they call a rock lord. It's a transforming thing. It's a monster that transforms into any ideas? I'll show you. Transforms into a rock. Okay. Now imagine a company invented this, a product manager managed this, teams built this, marketing advertised this. They made hundreds of thousands of these and didn't sell them in shops. Because what child wants a robot that turns to a rock? It's kind of like, it's the basic premise, right? So Velocity and toys, they suffer from all the issues we suffer from in IT, and they've got some better ideas. So that's the physicality of this object is more difficult to work with, but they're also open-minded. What I've been discovering in the outside IT space is people have an appetite for improvement. It's quite interesting being in tech so long. People are really sort of thirsty for something different. Something, how can I change what we're doing? It's not working. When in IT, people have now got a bit blasé to all the Agile world. They haven't. So the downside is it's far more difficult. My good practices, my stories work even less. It's like, oh, I built a website. They're like, they build websites, Like just the other week, I did a training course for some people, just self-driving car systems, like the cameras on self-driving cars. I've done fire alarms, and, so these are all interesting things. the work is different, the work is odd, but a lot of what we do has great application in their space, as long as we make sure we apply the right things in the right way, and we don't take it across all the good practices, because just because it's good for me may not mean it's good for you. But when you said about non-profit, that's the one area I found this stuff quite difficult, not because of the problem space, but because of the leadership style.
Or sense of urgency.
Yeah. Well, there's a huge sense of urgency, a huge sense of like, oh my God, the world's literally burning. In some cases, like they're doing that. But the leadership style can be quite autocratic. Like I've never worked in such ruthless places as charities. Charities are more ruthless than like, I worked in basically investment banks. You think investment banks would be cutthroat? They are kind of. But the charities have been far worse in terms of cutthroatness, dog eat dog. Because I don't know what it is about it, whether it's because people won't leave because they care about the cause, but the actual management styles I found have been more authoritarian than the classic companies I've been in. And that's a difficult thing for us to talk about, because, you know, we love the mission, we love the purpose, but how the organization is run. In fact, we've even had this in the Scrum Alliance. Like, I'm a great fan of Howard, who's the current Scrum Alliance sort of product owner. I've known Howard nearly 20 years. He's a good egg, a good person. Right? So his good heart's in the right place. But that's not always been true with Scrum Alliance leadership. A non-profit dedicated to agile, agility, transforming the world of work, being run in an authoritarian, you know, like very traditional management structure. And it's kind of like, that's very disappointing for me. But I can understand how it happens, but it's very disappointing. And so I think, again, the world of work is changing. The world of work, not just the world of IT. We can help in that space. We also need to listen in that space, because I think we can learn just as much from there as they can from us. I think you've got 2 ears, 1 mouth, so twice as much as this, right? And you can learn from that, and also just
easier said than done, but yeah.
Oh, so I'm talking. Look at me talking so much now. Talk. Love the sound of my own voice. It's difficult. It is so difficult just to go, but it's what we got to do. But also not take our eye off the ball, because I think my concern with that Scrum guide, for instance, is they've tried to make it more universal, but by making it more universal, they've watered it down slightly, and so it's become less applicable to anyone. So if they're not careful, they'll have a guide or Scrum that works for anyone doing anything, but offers no value. It's so diluted, you know, it's so watered down. And so we've got to understand that as well, I think. As we go outside the world of technology, we can learn, they can learn, but we've got to be a little bit careful sort of telling them how to do their own work when we don't do ours properly yet.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of times people, talk about Scrum and outside of IT, but, I spoke with Dave Snowden also, I think one of the first ones, and he said, like, Scrum is great for software development, period. It's not good for, in a sense, in context of Scrum. And, I think, I don't fully agree, but I think there's a lot of truth to that, where, again, I tell people, I see Scrum as a recipe. I see it as a little bit of flexible recipe, but still, at the end of the day, it's a recipe. And like, if you don't understand the core of that recipe, and if your context doesn't have all the ingredients for that recipe, then you're blindly following and trying to fit it into. And I don't know how much, Jeff and the people that are pushing for Scrum outside of IT, how much is it just the business decision versus acknowledging that, use whatever works and just know what you're doing, in a sense, rather than hey, Scrum is for everything. What are your thoughts on that?
Scrum isn't for everything, right? It really, really isn't. I think there are some deeper, so I remember, I'm going to say reading, but between you and I, no, not reading, watching The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. Right? It's a very famous children's book, very famous film. So I think they did some films, Disney did some films recently on them, but there was a cartoon in the 1970s in the UK, very popular in the UK, always shown at Christmas, always shown, very popular, right? Now, here's the problem. They talked about like magic in Narnia, and I can't remember the exact plot, but I do remember Aslan the lion saying, "You need to know a deeper magic. Like you got to know this magic, and they kill him, but he knows a deeper magic that comes back." I almost think there's a deeper Scrum under Scrum, right? And still, too much of it is just the fossil shape, like the footprint is not the foot. Like so, for me, there are some universal patterns behind what we do that I think have huge amounts of cross applicability, sense of purpose, idea of what you're doing, idea of empowered teams making decisions, working together collaboratively, talking to each other every day, empirically judging your work, looking not just at what you made, but how you made it and feeding back. That's like a universal truth within there, right? Which I think has a lot of cross applicability.
Exactly.
Sprint backlogs, product backlogs, standing up in scrums, reviews and retros. Those are all religions or recipes to try and create that underlying deeper magic. I think that Snowden's wrong, basically, but in those deeper patterns have much more strength than some people realize. But
those patterns, though, Nigel, those patterns are not Scrum, right? They existed before Scrum.
They exist after. But I've been talking about recently, who invented Scrum? Who invented it? Because you say, Jeff Sutherland, Ken Schwaber. Well, no, Ken Schwaber wrote down what other people were doing. If I drew a picture of an elephant, did I invent the elephant? No. Like Jeff Sutherland supposedly read the research paper, new product development game, supposedly, and said, here's to a team, try it out. But the team were already trying out ideas before that. And so did he create it? No, he did not. Did he influence it? Like if I put you're the chef. If I come along, taste your soup and add a little bit of salt, did I create the soup? No, it's like, and so like, but then you go to Takuchi and Naka. Oh, well, they invented Scrum. No, they looked at what other people were doing, So and so that's what I mean. There's a deeper, and that's actually think what's got the strength. These deeper underlying patterns have been around a long time. Daily Scrums turned up in monasteries in the Middle Ages, morning prayers. So these patterns have been around a long time. What I think we do is focus a bit more on them and a little bit less on perhaps specific recipes of how to achieve them. Those recipes are good, but because otherwise you end up with. So I've said this story before, and it's unfair, but it's a good place to finish is. Like I go to church. I don't go to church. Let's pretend I go to church. I have been to church. My mother was religious. I would go to church, and I'll sit in a Church of England church, and the church service would happen, right? And to be honest, as a 9-year-old boy, I've got no idea what's going on. There's incense being waved, things being drunk. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. I don't know why he's dressed up as a woman. I do not know. I don't have any context. So it just becomes a boring ritual. If you're Christian, those things have great symbology for you. They have great meaning. They have real resonance that takes you to a spiritual place that gives you deeper happiness and understanding. But me as an 8-year-old child, I'm just like, I don't know. He looks like a space marine. What's going on? And so I think far too many people are having ritualizing their agility, not even Scrum, their agility, but not in the right way to give a recipe, to give structure and help and a framework, a trellis on which to build their new ideas, but instead is just a ritual to follow, forgetting the real reasons behind it. Daily Scrum's a great example. We stand up for 15 minutes every day. Why? Because my boss told me to. Not because they're getting any value out of it. And so I think if we can clear away some of that noise and get to the deeper truths, I think people will get more value from this. It works in more contexts. People understand it better, and it spreads better because people can communicate it better. But that's not just,
that's challenge, right? Because what we're talking about is creating people to understand like why we're doing daily stand-ups. Why is it better for me as a developer to manage my work than having somebody manage it for me, right? But that's difficult for people that have been conditioned, right, not to think that way, or that just don't want that responsibility. So
the risk is the teams they've got responsibility for the negative side, not the positive side. So people say, now you're responsible for like planning your work, right? But they never say, and you get rewarded if you, and you get more pay rise. Because it's always like, but if you get it wrong, you're bad. So why responsibility without power is abuse. It's slavery. You know, it's just a weight without support. And so I think people find it very easy to say, oh, you now have more responsibility, but find it very difficult to add the associated power with that responsibility. And you can decide what you build and don't build. You can decide how to do it. You know, I think Spider-Man's uncle said it best. With great power comes great responsibility. Well, it's the other way around as well. If you're going to have great responsibility, you need to have great power.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, if I dressed up as Superman and ran around the streets of Bristol, I'll get arrested really quickly, fat Englishman in a Spider-Man suit, but I just don't have the ability to see that roll through. And it's not fair without the powers to give me that job.
Yeah. So, I mean, that points back to what you said earlier, which is the, leadership and level authority that, you're willing to delegate. And have you seen any shifts in that, giving people a little bit more authority? We talk in the new Scrum Guide, talks about self-managing, which is essentially saying that if you're self-managing team, I'm assuming you're deciding the what and how.
Yeah, but they redefine that by saying self-managers, you decide the what and the how, but then they're including product owner in the team. So it's kind of a bit of a cheat. But not as many people as I would like. I see organizations do it more naturally. I see it's difficult for organizations to change to that, to give more power to teams if they haven't classically had that power in place. I think so more in tech. So when I work with serious tech companies, that's where technology and business are quite highly lined. It seems to be a lot easier than when it's like this, when technology and business are separate worlds. Like if you're a law firm, so the law firm's a very different animal. And so they find it far more difficult to give that ability to those teams. But I think it's crucial. What I would say is my concern, the one I'm seeing more of now, not to be cynical, but I did say dash of cynicism, is that with all the coaching skills we're adding, all these people skills we're adding, I had a concern about 18 months ago, and it seems to be coming to fruition, that with all these coaching skills we're adding to people, like leaders, for instance, we seem to be equipping villains with slightly more sophisticated weaponry. So what's happened, rather than changing how the manager's like, oh, now I don't tell, now I support. Well, instead we've given them tools to give them sharper claws to get around the side of the shells of the developers and the workers. So tell me why you think you can't get that done by Christmas. And so, it's like, and so again, when I was a developer, it was quite easy. People came straight at you. They would come straight for you.
Get that shit done.
Get it done or you're fired. Like this, and it's horrible. It's disgusting. But at least with a straight line, you can dodge it as a developer. You've got tricks. You've got methods to get out of trouble. When people start getting very sophisticated with those tools, it's abusive coaching. It's using coaching tools to manipulate. And I think I get really into ethics these days. So even on Certified Scrum Master, which is supposed to be like an entry-level course, when I talk about coaching methods, I really nail it down to look, do no harm, stay on work. It's not about manipulation. It's not about an agenda, and really pound that home, because otherwise all that happens is we'll just take a bad culture and make it worse rather than changing the culture of how they work. And again, that's something in the Agile space. I think a lot of us have been excited with these new tools and have spread them for a while. And now we've got to make sure we sort of reap what we sow and make sure we're actually putting in the ethical side with the rest of it. Because we're all humans, we'll fail, we're weak. I'm fat. I've got really fat in lockdown. My joke was I traveled for 15 years for work and put weight on and got a bit chubby. And I was always telling my wife, she said, you got to lose weight. And I'm trying, but it's hard on the road. When you travel, it's like you travel, you eat in the wrong hotels at the wrong time, right? And then I've been at home for 18 months and I've put on 28, 30 pounds or something, some ridiculous number. Turns out it wasn't the job, it's I like to eat. And so we all fail. I understand. I think so. I've got to finish on this, but my two major points are there's a huge ethical component to this, to what we do, but correspondingly, we're all human and frail and going to break those ethics. And so if we can square that circle, I mentioned C.S. Lewis earlier on. He said about humility, he says, it's not thinking less of yourself, it's not putting yourself down, it's thinking of yourself less. i.e. not putting yourself in the center of it. If we can sort of embrace humanity, embrace a bit of humanness, but I'm frail and so are you. Let's try and find a way through this. If we can embrace those things, a bit of humbleness, I think then we've got a tool set to really change how things are. And that means stopping the sort of iconifying, or whatever the word is, of agile people. Certain agile people being put on pedestals. We've got to stop that. We've got to stop as a community relying on just a couple of people and be more community based, and just understand people are fragile and make mistakes. There'll be people say the wrong things at the wrong time, and just understand, like, yeah, it happens. Let's try and work with it. We'll fail, let's try and work and find a better way forward. And by doing that, we build environments that work. That we joked before about agile organizations. They'll make loads of mistakes. They'll do things bad. We will, as coaches, we will go, but we just got to say, okay, as the Christians would say, love the sinner, hate the sin. So like that sucks, but you're a great human being. Let's see what we can do about it. And I think that sort of mindset, I think, is what we really need to sort of help take us. The title of this, Agile to Agility. Take us from agile to agility. I think that's what we need to do.